But it was because I had a lack of belief in who Rob Spence was and what he was capable of. So it became Robert Spence, this author. I've had loads of struggles with my mental health over the years. I've not officially been diagnosed. I've got no real plans to get it officially diagnosed, and that's then transpired into some form of I've gone through burnouts. Here's your exclusive. I have had suicide attempts. I was brought up, we weren't necessarily sort of poor as such, but we didn't have the most affluent of upbringings. I mean, I thought spaghetti bolognese came from a tin. This is going to turn into a counselling session to some degree of not truly knowing who I am without work.
Hello and welcome to Leaders in Disguise, a podcast where we uncover the untold stories of leadership and wellbeing. I'm your host, Gary Parsons, and today we've got a truly exclusive episode featuring Rob Spence, the founder of Paragon Sales Solutions. Rob's business journey is remarkable. He started with just £300 and has grown it into an award-winning agency, recently named Business of the Year at the 2024 Business Success Awards. In this exclusive episode, we delve into Rob's personal battles with mental health, discuss the challenges that he's faced, including overcoming depression and suicide attempts, and how he's managed to build a thriving business despite all of that. Stay tuned as we explore Rob's experiences and how they've shaped his leadership, and how he's using this platform to advocate for mental health in business. This is one that you don't want to miss. Let's jump into the next episode. Rob, welcome to Leaders in Disguise. Now, I'm going to say for everybody else, we've been talking for a while, so finally great to meet you. How are you doing?
Yeah, really well, thank you, really well. And yeah, just to mirror that, I know we've been connected on socials for quite a while, so it feels like I know you. And it's been quite nice. I got here super early, which I apologise for.
Yeah, that's fine. No one ever sees this when the guest turns up really early. Today we've roped you into getting set up.
Oh,
so.
Yeah, and I'm going to invoice you later for the manual labour. But, even then, the day's been great to chat with you, off camera and stuff. It's really flowed. So nice to finally be here.
Thank you. So just by way of introduction, founder, managing director of a company called Paragon Sales Solutions. Make sure I get that right. 2018, you set that business up. But like I said, there's people that won't know you, won't have heard of you. I say that, you probably know everyone. It feels like you might. Do you want to just give us a flavour of who you are, what you do, multi-award winning business that you've got as well this year?
You're going to make me blush.
Absolutely, I've got an hour of this.
Yeah.
Everyone, so, yeah.
And look, really appreciate that. So yeah, I own and founded a company called Paragon Sales Solutions. So the best way to describe me is I'm a sales nerd. That if you were to sort of give me a title, sales nerd. I love sales. I've not always loved sales, which I'm sure we'll kind of talk about throughout the show. But for me, I set out on a mission in 2018 to help people with their sales. Now, whether that be on a personal level or within a business, my argument is that the most important part of any business function is sales. You can have the best product, the best service here, you can have the best HR team, you can have the best accountancy setup. But if you're not making money, then what's the point? So I set up the business in the corner of my bedroom in 2018 on an old desk on a battered old iMac. And here we are, 6.5 years later, is it? That's scary, isn't it? But yeah, 6.5 years later.
An interesting 6.5 years as well, a disruptive one.
Absolutely.
Where people have changed, haven't they? I in the world of sales myself for many years, and I hate the word sales, by the way, so forgive me, we'll get into that in a minute.
I can change your mind on that,
yeah,
that's fine.
I love it, but I hate the word. There's a phrase I always use, and I'm sure I've said it on the podcast before, but we hear the phrase where people buy from people, but we never say people sell to people. And I thoroughly believe that we getting too deep in the podcast already, but I ultimately believe that people buy what they want to buy, they won't be sold to. But the people that get sold to tend to be the vulnerable people, the ones that shouldn't be sold to, that should have that break in time, that call off period, etc. But
I couldn't agree with you more. And that's exactly what I've set out to do. We all know or have been sold to by, no offense to those people out there, but the sweaty, sleazy, greasy salespeople, the 1980s double glazing salespeople of the world and everything. And for me, they're not salespeople. They're manipulators. They are dictators to some degree, and they're not salespeople. For me, the best salespeople, and a lot of the training and coaching I give, is the best way to sell is actually during the opening phase and the relationship phase. whenever I go in, I do a lot of sales training and sales coaching, and everyone wants to hear about the closing. How do I close? What closing techniques? I'm like, well, there's relevance there. Of course there is. You know, you need to close a sale. But if you do the hard work first, the close just becomes a question of, would you like to buy? And the biggest term I always hate is, oh, he can sell ice to the Eskimos. Well, let me tell you something. The Eskimos don't need ice. They do not need ice. If I could sell an Eskimo a nice woolly jumper, that makes me a better salesperson.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with what you're saying.
I think, if you sell ice to an Eskimo and they buy it from you, then they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they don't need that ice, but they've been sold to.
Exactly. But there's certainly a cooling off period, isn't there?
Yeah. Do you know, one of the things I've not mentioned when I've introduced you is you've also got lots of books that you've written. And I remember looking online and seeing, and we need to throw this in there. So Rob Spence, I've seen that your pen name is Robert Spence.
Yeah.
There's a story behind that.
There is, and it's quite a sad story. But so I authored my first book in 2017. Now, I've always gone by the name Rob. The only people that used to call me Robert was my mum telling me off or calling me down for dinner on a Sunday, and I didn't listen to it because I was doing something else. And when I authored the first book, I dropped out of college quite young for a variety of reasons, and I'd never authored anything longer than 500 words, 1,000 words. I'd missed all the dissertation phases and essays of schooling. So when I suddenly put out this, 40,000 word book, if I'm honest, it was a lack of self-belief in myself. And I'd kind of weirdly used, not a fake persona, because I'm still Rob Spence. Legally, I'm Robert Spence. I'm not going to break any spy laws with my change in identity there. But it was because I had a lack of belief in who Rob Spence was and what he was capable of. So it became Robert Spence, this author. But now it creates confusion because everyone's like, well, who is he? Is he Robert Spence? Rob Spence? I don't know.
It's interesting to hear it. Obviously, we talk about leaders in disguise and the masks that we wear. I can hear that imposter syndrome, perhaps.
Oh, 100%. And back then, when I authored it, I'd never heard of the term imposter syndrome. I don't know how long it's been going around, but when you look at, quote unquote, the symptoms I was going through when the book was published, 100%. I didn't believe that I could have authored a book, and I thought people would be judging me because they know who I am and that I don't have these qualifications and so on and so forth. So absolutely massive imposter syndrome.
So we'll try and move away from sales. It's going to be really hard to do. The only thing that we're going to sell on this podcast is ultimately the fact that people are listening to this, watching it, and sell the idea that they need to go and prioritize their mental health and well-being. So That's your task today for me, if that's okay.
And a priority to hit the follow button or subscribe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Join the Patreon account.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
all the supporters do. Some people even sponsor as well. So absolutely. I'm sure though that people will buy into you and understand that not all salespeople are the ones that you talk about. And ultimately they realise that people buy from people. So we'll do that. So moving away from that though, and you just hinted at it a little bit. When we were talking, I said, oh, you should come along, and I know you run your own podcast. We'll jump into that later, or a couple of podcasts. I said, oh, we should get you on Leaders in Disguise. What would we talk about? And you revealed, and I'm really pleased that you called it an exclusive earlier, that you've not really talked about this publicly, about your own mental health challenges that you've had. I'm just going to repeat as well here that you are sat here, a successful businessman. You started 2018 in this current business. You've had lots of different guises of different businesses. Your networking, I saw on your LinkedIn profile. You've won awards. You've just had Business of the Year 2024. You were at the awards that I'm hopefully going to later this year.
I'm going to convince you to come along.
Oh, yeah. It's so expensive to go to awards, but the Great British Entrepreneur Awards. I've been shortlisted for that, as you know, as you have. You're a really successful guy, and even though I'm sitting here talking about what we do and hearing the word success, to receive a message like you sent me was quite a shock. Where does all of this come in? Where did your journey start with mental health?
It's a really, really good question. And I just want to say, massive kudos to you and the show here and the podcast here for raising awareness, because mental health is it's the be all and end all. Let's not beat around the bush. We are grey matter in a bio frame that carries us around, and, mental health is important. And if we can't look after it, we're all going to struggle. And I think the number one key thing to looking after it is having an openness, an awareness, and a responsiveness awareness around it. My whole argument around mental health is, if I twist my ankle, I will let people know. You will see those symptoms of me having a twisted ankle and so on. Everyone goes through some mental health, I'll use the term ailment, could be the wrong term, but some kind of mental health deterioration at some point in their lives. But we're always told we're British, we got to stiff up a lip, we got to keep it quiet, we don't want people to judge and everything else. Thankfully, I think because of people like yourself and the podcast, we are becoming a lot more open and a lot more honest. And sometimes I think that honesty isn't just externalized, we don't talk about it, but I think people are now more aware of their own feelings, their own emotions and mental health. So for me, I've had loads of struggles with my mental health over the years. I'm a big believer, and this hasn't been diagnosed. I was listening to one of your guests on the actually, as I was getting ready this morning, talking quite openly about her recent diagnosis of ADHD and I think autism. I think she mentioned as well. We, rightly or wrongly, my friends and I, family, have always joked, "You've clearly got ADHD. Clearly got ADHD." And every test I do, I'm always scoring 95, 96%, very high. I've not officially been diagnosed. And full transparency, and I can talk about this in a second if you wish, I've got no real plans to get it officially diagnosed, and I've got reasons for that. But 100%, I think a lot of my mental health has always stemmed from this ADD or ADHD being there and me not realizing it. And that's then transpired into some form of I've gone through burnouts, I've gone through depression. Here's your exclusive. I have had suicide attempts, quite clearly failed suicide attempts in the past. And I do genuinely believe that they stem from this undiagnosed, unrecognized, untreated ADHD.
Because you're a naturally ambitious person. And I say naturally, you're an extremely ambitious person. I have the privilege of following you on Instagram, which I'm pleased to see you're on holiday a lot over the last month or so. But even when you're not, I watched a video where you were hoovering around and getting a studio ready. You've set up your own creative space over in Leicester, which is me giving you a plug there. And you're doing that. You're the guy that will literally clean the toilets, put the flat pack bookcase up right through to going out and meeting your clients and doing that work and doing that outsourcing of sales, and then going to an awards. You are a work addict.
Oh, absolutely. And although I love that, that is my passion. I've always been hardworking. I also think at times it's also my detriment, because I strongly believe that I don't know when to stop. I don't know when to rest. I don't know when to say enough is enough. Even yesterday I was at an East Midlands Chamber event up in Nottingham. So, it's about an hour's drive from where I was. I'd driven all the way there, had the event. And by the time the event had finished, it was sort of 3:00 in the afternoon. Now, to get back to my offices, I have to drive past my house. And I thought, actually, I'm going to go back to the office and get the studio set up. So I've then had to, come back down the M1, get to the studios, get to the offices, put on some, rough attire as opposed to my suit. And I was in the office studio until 7:00. But like you say, I was putting up curtains, hoovering up, getting the place ready. But I do think I am ambitious. I want a good life, and I want to inspire those around me and help those around me. But sometimes it can be quite a negative.
You've hinted at it there, and a question I wanted to ask you: what drives that? Why do you work hard?
I think a multitude of reasons. I think I was brought up, we weren't necessarily sort of poor as such, but we didn't have the most affluent of upbringings. I mean, I thought spaghetti bolognese came from a tin. That was my kind of upbringing.
Does it not?
No, apparently not. That was my kind of upbringing, and I still recall, seeing my mum counting tuppence, from a what they called a piggy bank to pay for the week's shopping or whatever. So I think a lot of it stems from that desire to not not have that kind of lifestyle for myself and those around me. You know, I've had bailiffs come to the door to, you know, try and evict us out of the house and everything. So I've been very evident and very passionate about not having that. I think there is something that stems deeper into, and this is going to turn into a counselling session to some degree, of not truly knowing who I am without work. And I've realised recently that that's not a good thing. You know, if you take Rob Spence out of work, who is he? What does he do? I do need to work on that, and I am working on it. But I think it stems from, like I say, the desire to have a comfortable life and to hopefully one day relax, but also to kind of fill a hole, dare I say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hope you don't mind me asking the questions here. So, and you very honestly said, look, I'm open book then. So, only child, single parent, or did you have brothers and sisters growing up?
So I'm lots of viewers and listeners will recognise that I'm the middle child. So very much middle
the
child.
Traits of middle child that's going on.
Absolutely. Don't forget about me, guys. I'm still here. So I've got an older brother and a younger sister. So, you know, brought up with my two parents. They divorced, I think during my teenage years, and I think a lot of that once again has set belief systems in me, and that's then when the sort of the worst part of sort of, dare I say, my upbringing came about. And it, you know, bless them, it was no fault of my parents. Of course, it's not. These things happen. Yeah. However, still for I believe a teenager going through that stage or that phase in their life with all the hormones kicking off and X, Y, Z, it's still it was a traumatic experience for me and my belief systems. And then seeing my father deteriorate into quite severe depression and other mental health illnesses that then led to bad debt, that then led to job losses, to then bailiffs going around. You know, it's really marked an impact in my life.
It's interesting. It's interesting to hear it. And the reason I asked that question, and thanks for answering it, is myself, I'm an only child, which many people also recognise, and stereotypically. And my mum raised me for most of my life. Dad was there a little bit. That's the only time I'll ever really mention him on here. But yeah, ultimately my mum was there raising me. And I look back now, and I don't know about you, I work hard to make sure that I can look after her in her growing years. I'll not use the O word, but in her many
experienced
years that she's in. And for me, you know, one of those examples is that she's moved into a bungalow. You know, just physically, it's, you know, comes a time in our lives where we have to do that, and I gave her money towards that because I knew that was really important for her. Okay, it had an impact on my own finances, but I did it because it was really important to do that. And I always look back and think, you talk about that wasn't quite tuppence when I was there. I'm sure we're the same age.
No, it was still 2p's and 5p's.
Yeah, I'm sure we definitely were the decimal. But ultimately, from my point of view, is, you know, seeing your mum go and do that. My mum had a couple of different jobs here, there, and everywhere to make sure that I had the right type of clothes, that I got the things that I needed minimum. And I don't know about you, but I felt as though, I certainly do now at the grand old age of 41, that actually I look back and go, I need to go and make sure that she's okay, because she did everything she possibly could do to look after me. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
as a middle child.
Yeah. If they remember me, no, absolutely. Yeah, 100. Look, let's not be around the bush. The biggest thing and best thing in life is family. That's, no matter what anyone says, that's what we all work for. That's what we strive for. You know, whether that is extended family, whether it's a close nuclear family, and I think it is important. And, you know, like I say, you know, I luckily I've got a good relationship with my family, with my parents, and I'll always be there to help and support. You know, fortunately, touch wood, you know, they're quite okay themselves now, you know, and it's been quite nice recently. My father's going through quite a severe sort of downward spiral into dementia. And my mum recently, or I say recently, could be a couple of years ago now actually, but bought my father a house. So my mum's my dad's landlord, which is a weird situation to be in. But it shows that, like, over time these nice things can come about. And, you know, I'm sure that one day, as unfortunately my father slowly deteriorates and everything else, I'll be there to help and support where needed. And it's the same with my mum and stepdad as well.
Sound like they're lucky to have you.
I say they're very lucky to have me. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. And actually, I can see that caring quality that comes out in you. We joked about the old-fashioned kind of salesperson that would sell at you. I can see where those values come from just sitting with you and talking to you. I do feel like I'm on a counselling session with you, like you say, but certainly I can see those values that come out, that you want to do the right thing, you want to look after everybody. What does family look like closer to home for you now?
So I've got a lovely girlfriend. Girlfriend sounds really young, doesn't it? Yeah, a partner, lady, I don't know. So yeah, Lucy and I were just going through the journey of buying a house, which is exciting. For me, cheesy, and there might be some HR people out there that are completely against this, but my family extends out to my team and the people within my work. You know, I know, like I said, there's a big thing within HR, and we've got a new government now who are very much work is work, you know, home is home, and I understand that. But for me, I love going into the office, seeing my team, seeing my friends, my family. So they have naturally become an extension, and that, going back, I'm not trying to float my own ego here or anything, but that care extends out to my team as well. My team, we're very close. Whenever they need help, or whether it be a word, whether it's an ear, whether it's advice, occasionally money, I've always been there to support.
This is a really good time to mention Sophia, your co-host of your podcast.
Absolutely, yes.
And absolutely, we need to make sure we mention her, because I feel like she might come for me,
let
alone you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, big shout out to Sophia. Sophia's been great for the business. If I'm honest, been great for me as well. She's become a good friend. Obviously all of the team are. But if I'm allowed to say, we also host the How I Failed in Business podcast, and a lot of that has been led by Sophia. So, we had this idea for the podcast, and it was, should we do this? Should we do that? And we'd kind of got a concept, and Sophia joined the business. She's going to kill me if I get it wrong, but it's probably February, March time of this year, which is 2024. Okay. And we did some early kind of screen tests, and I was like, yeah, this is ideal. And I remember asking her, will you co-host this with me? And I've only found out recently, she was very energetic, very excited to do it, which you can understand why, obviously. But I only found out maybe a couple of weeks or months ago, but she was so nervous.
Really?
It was completely out of her comfort zone, So yeah, massive shout out to Sophia. So no, thanks for joining the business, Sophia.
Bless you. Jumping forward, if I can then. So success is an interesting word. We talk about you being so successful, and you just mentioned there How to Fail in Business as a podcast. That's quite a strong word to use. Do you see yourself as a successful person? I know I've used that phrase a few times.
Yeah, you have. That's a very deep and good question, isn't it? I think when we look at success means something different to everyone, doesn't it? Some people, success is millions of pounds in the bank. Another person, success to them is being able to clock off at 4 p.m. and go home to their family. Everyone's got their own ideas towards success. For me personally, success is about having a strong and healthy work, strong and healthy life, strong and healthy relationships, and that's everything within those, and that's what I achieve for. So when we look at how I failed in business, similar to I guess what you're doing with this great podcast and this great show, is we're trying to remind people that actually failures happen. Things aren't always plain sailing, as we're going to actually talk about later. Yeah. And actually, correct me if I'm wrong, I've never met a business person or entrepreneur or whatever who's not gone through a period of failure and mishaps and everything else.
Failures happen every day. I failed to get here. I quite often say this. Hopefully, they don't just. How many times does Gary say he fails to get here on time? I'm not great with time, especially at the moment. I'm living away from home, just at this moment in time of recording this, and getting here and traffic and stuff like that. That you could say that was a failure. You arrived pretty much the same time, but you were early. But we've got to bear those in mind. But yeah, you're right. There are periods of failure that people go through. But there are also periods of success that people go through. It's really important to try and define the two. Would you say success keeps you going? Or would you say, and you talk about ADHD, one of the terminologies that I hear about is rejection sensitivity. or SD disorder. I hate the word disorder, but syndrome, whatever you want to call it. You're in sales.
Yeah,
I've especially after 2020, in fact, let's just deal with this. I've been on the phone and not getting through to anyone because everyone's moved to mobile phones, or you just can't get through to anyone, or they say no to you, the classic gatekeeper that doesn't want to put your call through. Like, how do you deal with failure as a person?
Yeah,
You must have a lot. That you must have it in doses.
it's
That sounds awful.
no, yeah. I am a good salesperson, I promise.
Yeah,
but,
sure. But rejection,
oh gosh, yeah. And I was thinking about this on the drive in. Rejection is part and parcel of sales. Once again, there is no such salesperson who's never been rejected once or twice. Now, one of my biggest weaknesses, and I think is a massive trigger for a lot of my previous sort of really bad mental health episodes, has been rejection. Sometimes on a personal level, sometimes on a business level. The only thing I can say on rejection from a business and a sales side is the more punches to the face I've had, the number my face has become. It's literally become part and parcel. I still remember the first rejections I had as a salesperson. I remember, my very first ever outbound sales call. Now this was, I'm not ancient, but back in the day when there was no headsets, you still had the whole, the old handset. And I remember my hand was, genuinely shaking up to the ear. Hello, voice cracking and everything else. Now it's part and parcel. I get rejected on a daily basis. I'm still quite active in the business where I'm trying to sell for the business. I think the biggest rejection that still hurts me a lot, but once again, I'm getting more used to it, is when a client no longer wants to work with us for whatever reason. That still hurts because I take it personally. But I think for myself and the way my brain is and how I am now, it's just become a uniformed reaction. I understand it. I get it. There'll be another one. There'll be another chance.
So it's that mindset then ultimately going, this is something that happens. There is a probability of it happening. So therefore I will experience it today.
Absolutely.
You're a leader of, obviously you're a leader of a great business. How do you help your team get over rejection? Because there's people that are listening, watching now, where they dread sales calls. I've had people that have come into the business for me over the years and gone, yeah, it's true, I can do sales. And they have, they've nosedived. I've got to say, by the way, I love it. I love getting on the phone because I love
Really?
the adrenaline of them going, yeah, no problem, I'll put you through, or yeah, sure, or they give you the information.
It's
I'm a
that
little
thrill
bit
of the
detective.
chase, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
you say, and I guess that's the addictive kind of chemicals that go through our mind, that those hits of someone letting us in. But yeah, you obviously, you lead a team, you lead a business. What do you do to help them get over it?
So we're very aware of emotions within our business, and if we backtrack that slightly, so I was listening to one of your guests earlier, and once again, there's an argument to or for this, or to or against this, for or against, I should say. We've been always very strict about working in the office, with one of the main reasons being around emotion and rejection. Because when I suffered one of my first burnouts, and this was 2018, it could have been 2019, actually, beg your pardon. I'm a big believer that a lot of that was because I was in my home. I was still working from home and starting the business from home. Home is great. Home is your sanctuary. Home is where the heart is. Home is where you relax, you unwind, and you're supposed to be safe. And so if you're dealing with sales, which is a highly emotive task, it's a highly emotive job, and you are in your safe space, if you are in your sanctuary, it ruins the vibrations and the aura of the room, in my opinion. It ruins that relaxation pace, because if you're sat there on your sofa like we are today, typing away on a laptop, and someone rejects you, later on that night at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, when you're supposed to be unwinding and watching your latest series binge on Netflix, those memories of you being rejected are there on that sofa with you. So we've been very prominent to say it's in the office, because there it's, at the end of the day, you shut the door, the problems are gone. Don't worry and stress about it. When we take on new salespeople, new executives to join us, they get put through a really strict sales training program, which is led by myself. And a lot of that is led around emotional intelligence and emotional awareness and an understanding of these emotions that will happen. And it's not just, I've talked quite heavily about sort of like the negative emotions. So the rejection, sometimes the fear of rejection, the sadness, sometimes maybe the guilt, sometimes embarrassment comes into play as well.
Yeah, the shame of not hitting targets this month or this week.
Absolutely. But sometimes we've got to remember, sometimes there's the high emotions as well, which are great and wonderful, but sometimes can actually be very damaging, and especially then when you've got waves of emotion going through an office where someone could have gone through 20 calls and not got anywhere. There's things going on in their personal life anyway, they're down, they're upset, whatever. And then you've got someone next to you who's ringing our bell that we've got, running around the office, clapping, cheering. So we're very open and honest around those emotions, being aware of those emotions. And alongside that, we always open up really strong communication channels. So although we've got the official one-to-one, monthly one-to-ones where we look at performances and just have open conversations about where people are, I've very much got an open door policy. If your girlfriend's dumped you last night and you need someone to talk to, come and talk to me about it. If you're upset because your neighbour's moved your bin and now your wheelie bin's down the road and it's really angered you, come and talk to me about it. Those communication channels are key to keeping everyone on a good emotional kind of awareness state, I think.
Do you think it helps because you are so approachable and you are, I go back to the book, you talk about relationships and building that with a team. Do you think that makes a difference in terms of your leadership style because you've been through burnout, because you've had depression, the suicide attempts that you touched on? Does that play into your leadership style?
I think it does. I try to be very careful to not use my own situations or my own experiences to kind of domineer over what someone else is going through, but it does really help me empathize. It helps me understand where people are. And although under no circumstance am I an qualified psychiatrist, qualified counsellor, anything like that, what I can do is share my experiences, similar to what your show does, to remind people that actually there are things that people can take away and learn. And for some people it won't be relevant, for others it will be. All I can do is share my experiences and help. And I think, I don't think there's not one team member that, I don't know if this is a good thing or not, there's not one team member that I've not seen cry at least once.
It's normal. It's normal. And you queued up really nicely there. Just before we started recording, we were talking about what this podcast is about. And this podcast is ultimately about, it's people like yourself coming onto this couch, having a conversation as lovely as we are having, but being able to say, this is normal. 72% of leaders, and I use this stat all the time to drill this into people's heads. The reports, the surveys, the research is saying 72% of leaders, founders experience mental health challenges. That is having a bad day. That is, I don't know about you, I had a headache for 3 days on a run once upon a time, and that affects our mental health. How do you keep going, especially when you are in a targeted, pressured environment? But coming here and saying, look, this is normal. We're not giving people excuses. And I always say there's a real difference between a reason that something's happening and an excuse. We're not giving someone the excuse to ultimately use it. We're giving them the opportunity to talk about the reason that this is happening in their life. And like you say, something as trivial to some people, but a dog dying or a cat dying or really bad road rage or queues that into the office in the morning, or something that's happening in their life, they are just normal things that happen to normal people. And as leaders, we're normal. And by the sounds of it, your team feel, just from what you've said, it'd be great to ask them this question directly, I'm sure you will, but your team sound like they're able to approach you because you are approachable and you are that open book. But I'm sure you'll still have boundaries about what you will and won't share, and that's absolutely fine, and I think you should. But it sounds like you've just got this really lovely culture of approachable.
I appreciate that. And I think where I've seen businesses, I'll use the word struggle, but sometimes fail, sometimes dwindle, is where there's closed doors, shut away conversations, little sects, little groups of people, and a lack of communication. And if the key word that I'm getting from a lot of the research, studying, and the work I'm doing, communication is just key. If you communicate where things are as a business, it stops the doubt of, oh my gosh, is my job safe? Which then adds on to someone's stress. Am I performing well? Am I doing well enough? I've not generated this in a while. Am I okay? Am I doing well enough? Or I'm going through this at home in my personal life, but I feel like I can't share it with anyone. So what they then internalize things, it makes things worse. Communication is key. And, you know, although I've seen, like I say, I'm sure there's probably one person in the team I don't think I've seen cry, but I'll try and get him today if I can.
He trips them up on the way into the office.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll get something, even if it's just get him to chop some onions later. But I don't think there's anyone within my team who's not seen me cry at times. It's not, heard me be upset or admit to be scared, embarrassed. We're very much an open book. And what that does is it builds the trust. It allows people to know exactly where they're at, what's going on, and everything else between. It leaves you very vulnerable. Of course it does. But these are the people that I spend probably 70 to 80% of my life with. I actually see my team more than I see my partner. So these are the people that, in theory, I need to be able to trust. And, I think that communication, two-way communication is crucial.
Can I ask directly, when was the last time you cried in front of the team, and what was it about?
Gosh, yeah. It was this year actually, and every year we have a kick-off meeting, and we it's my year, it's my time to say, look, this is what we did last year. And I'm very open about finances, very open about what we're making, what we're losing, where we need to focus, what the plans are for the year. As part of that, we always kind of share the journey of the business. And the reason we do that is to remind what we're trying to do, what we exist to do. And also it helps keep people who have recently joined the business up to date and so on. Now, one thing I've not mentioned so far, and it's something once again I don't really talk about. So I've got two children, Jacob and Alice, who I've been fighting with the courts for years for access and everything else in between. And last year it was a very heavy year of court cases, court battles, and everything else. And I shared with some of the group knew, some of the group didn't know. And I thought, actually, look, this is the time I go, look, this is what's happening. This is what I'm going through on a personal level. I need a bit of empathy. I need a bit of understanding here. And it was then when, it was one of the key slides to the thing, a photo of me and the two children, taking them to an award year 2 years ago, I think it was now, and saying, look, this is what I'm going through. And I just broke down and said, look, I'm going to have to call this off for half an hour or so. So quite recent.
What was the reaction?
It was well received is the wrong answer. There was no judgment, which I'm lucky about. Good. And, I don't think it's absolutely 100% not diminished me as a man or as a leader. And if I'm honest, I think actually it brought us all together, because if there were times where I seemed unnecessarily stressed or unnecessarily angry or unnecessarily hurt, I think it allowed people to go, oh, actually, I didn't know Rob was going through this. And what was quite nice was a couple of the team came up to me afterwards and said, look, I'm sorry you're going through that. My partner's going through the same thing. This is happening in my life. This is happening here. And it just brought everyone together.
So I relate to that in my own way. So obviously, I had my Bell's palsy in 2001 and didn't speak about it for 20 years. And just to kind of relate it back, if I may, ultimately, when I started talking about that with the team, they started to go, oh, I can kind of understand why that's a challenge for you. And they won't know exactly what it's like for you, but at least, like we talked earlier about using things as an excuse or as a reason. And you're not saying, look, I'm a bit horrible to be around, or this, that, and the other, please excuse me. You're actually saying, look, guys, actually, this is the reason why it's happening. I'm sorry. I'm apologetic that I'm being like this, but this is what's going on, and I'm giving you the narrative. So it's nice that you were able to share that with them, because that could have been something you could have kept personal, but it gave them that opportunity, didn't it, to just go, look, things are happening. And I know we were talking before we started recording, you're saying about moving house. That's, what is it, divorce, moving house, and something else are the most stressful times in our lives. How are you going to manage your own well-being during that time, Rob? Tell me.
Yeah.
Let's do counselling mode. What are you going to do differently to manage your own well-being during moving house?
Get the chaise lounge out. We'll we'll really kick into a counselling.
I thought you meant during the move.
Yeah.
Watch the delivery guys going in like,
no, sorry,
yeah.
I went for the counselling session now. Yeah, and once again, I've been very open and honest with the team and said, look, in my personal life, this is what's going on. It shouldn't really affect work, but sometimes maybe a bit distracted, X, Y, Z. For me personally, I find sort of my coping mechanisms towards, stress and hardship is exercise and being active. I'm full transparency, I'm carrying a bit of extra body fat than I'd want at the minute, and they say the camera adds 10 pounds, and there's at least 10 cameras in the room.
Is awful,
so,
unfortunately. Yeah. This camera is the worst camera for that. So I do apologise.
No, don't be silly. But for me, even just that physical activity, and I always feel it if I've not been to the gym in a couple of days, I can feel it, and I think, for me, it's all about that exercise. And I think as well, whenever we're dealing with anything in life, whether it is going through a divorce, whether it's going through some sort of form of illness or whatever, or whether it is a house move, I think being kind and understanding to yourself is probably the most crucial thing. I think if it's normally when we battle with ourselves and go, no, come on, you shouldn't feel like this. Once again, go back to that stiff upper lip. We're British. Let's just have a cup of tea and crack on. If we actually allow ourselves to have those emotions, because there's no emotion really that is a taboo to some degree. As long as you allow those emotions to happen, understand why you're feeling that way, can you deal with a problem? If you can deal with it, then I find that everything just flows so much more smoothly.
It's really refreshing to hear that you don't wear a disguise. And I genuinely, there's some people I talk to and I think, oh, they kind of do. But you genuinely don't wear that disguise, how it feels, certainly. And just go, look, this is something that's going on. You sat there and said, oh, I want to go to the gym, but I'm carrying a bit more weight than I'd like to. But you're just like, well, that is what it is.
That's how it is.
Factual, that is going on. I can hear, though, the one acknowledgement that I would say to you, if you don't mind me, is because you work so much, because you are there so often, don't work while you're moving house, Rob, please. You just concentrate on that one thing. Have a bit of time to yourself. I talk very openly in some of the workshops that I run as well about the masks that we wear. And one of the masks that I talk about is one that is that always on mask. They're like, I'm always accessible. I'm always free to get in touch with you if you ever need me. I know I'm moving house, but ring me anyway. Ironically, I was moving out of my house and I had one of the directors of the company I'm still invested in ring me and say the website's gone down. Now, I'm probably the one person that you would ring. And, he said, look, it's fine. The website's down. At the end of the day, there's not a lot we can do. Do what you're doing and I'll speak to you later. Someone else fixed it in 10 minutes. I've got to say I spent 3 hours trying to fix it. Somebody else fixed it in 10 minutes, but they rang me. That's fine. That's an emergency. But I would say, go and switch off. And I know it's important for you and Lisa to have time out. Go and try and just switch off. And of course, we've got this new legislation that the government are playing with. We're recording this in August 2024. Let's see whether it comes through, about the right to switch off. Those fans of Emily in Paris, I saw on Netflix, I saw an episode the other day where they were talking about it, going, it's illegal to contact me at the weekend. I wonder what that looks like. In fact, let's have this conversation now. What do you think that looks like? Have you heard of the legislation? Have you seen it coming through?
Absolutely. And I want to be clear, I'm very much an advocate for it, because I know that there is a lot of toxicity that happens outside of work. And I remember somewhere where I used to work years ago before I set up the business. And, I had one of those bosses that would call you at literally any hour of the day to have a go at you because a light was left on in the office or whatever, and that really, really played on me a lot. So I'm a big advocate for switching off. I've always been very clear with my team. Look, after 5, I don't want you to be working, and you're not, people have said, oh, can I take my laptop? No, I don't. No, you're not taking your laptop home. And I've sort of, had conversations with people who have, without my knowledge, added their work email to their phone. And I've said, why? I don't want you to, So I'm a big advocate for it. Don't get me wrong, what we've got to remember is that if we want to achieve anything in life, sometimes we have to do things outside of those normal work hours, and we've got to sometimes push hard. But once again, I'd rather that extra work and effort be put in the office, where it's a bit more of a protected space, is the word I'd want to use. For me personally, I absolutely agree with you. You know, it's something that I do rarely, but one of the best things I've done ever so recently, and I advise everyone to do it. Okay, this is my number one tip.
Okay.
Even for a leader, get LinkedIn off your phone and get your email off your phone. I know there's a lot of business leaders out there going, oh, no, I couldn't do that. Just do it. It's the best thing. And what prompted it is myself and Lucy, my partner, we went to London. Goodness, so at the time of recording, it was last week, I think. So we went to go see Taylor Swift, her Eras tour. And, you know, I had a very open conversation with the team and said, look, this is the first time I've been away from the business in, goodness, I can't remember when. I'm going to be taking emails off my phone. I'm going to be taking LinkedIn off. I'm going to mute our work group chat and I'm going to archive it so I can't see it. I said, I am here, but really only for emergencies. Like if it's life or death, you know, make sure you all know what you need to do before I go away. And my goodness, it was great to not have to think about work for a few days. And even since I've come back, those emails haven't been added to my phone. LinkedIn hasn't been added to my phone. And that's the way it's going to stay.
Well done. I'm really pleased, because I was about to sit here and say, it's a bit contradicting here, Rob. You're telling your team to not have their emails on their phone. You're telling them to turn, I'm going to be hard on you. Well, I was going to be hard on you, but I've got no reason to now. You've saved yourself. But yeah, so many people go like, you as a team, you've got to finish at 5 o'clock. You can't take your laptop home. You can't have your emails on your phone, but it's okay for me to do it. And then we're not leading by example then, are we? We are saying it's okay to do it. Like and then we're almost punishing you with like these measures to say you can't do this, but I am allowed to, and I can catch up on my work and this, that, and the other. But so that's a huge step for you.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
It's huge, and I think it's well needed. You know, I was getting to those bad habits of sitting around at 8, 9 o'clock at night where I should be unwinding. I should be binging nonsense on Netflix. I shared with you off camera, very embarrassingly, I'm a bit of a gamer. You know, I do love, you know, getting really into a good game. And I'd check my emails. Why am I checking my emails at 9 o'clock at night when I probably can't do anything? If I send an email in response to whatever I've seen, they're probably not going to see it until the morning anyway. And all I'm doing is, if it's a negative email for whatever reason, you know, maybe a supplier's put their prices up, maybe a client's gone, whatever it is, I'm allowing my evening to be sucked into negative emotions to then where I can't relax. Now, if I can't relax, I can't sleep well. If I can't sleep well, I can't lead then the next day. So what is the point? What is the point? And it's the same with LinkedIn. I'd sit there scrolling. I'd do the horrible doom scroll that we all do. And once again, we should stop. You know, you go from Facebook, you go to Instagram, you go to X, you go to LinkedIn, you suck in all the content you can, and you go back to the start. And I'd sit there and go through LinkedIn, and you'd go, oh, what's that person doing? Oh, I need to message that person. Why? What?
And then they reply, and then you can reply to them. And yeah, it can do. And it's great that you acknowledge that. Let's see how long it lasts.
Well, yeah, I hope for a long time.
You keep on doing it. We are running out of time. I wanted to ask you a couple of quick fire questions, if I may, before we disappear anywhere. Your experience is great for like you say, you've experienced failure, you've experienced success. There's lots of different tips that I'm sure people watching, listening, I would say watching to make sure people remember to go on YouTube, get it on your TV, get it on your phone.
Get it and hit subscribe.
Was it Spotify now that you can, my hairdresser said to me, I looked down at the phone and saw your face on my phone whilst I was on the airplane.
Absolutely.
And I realised that you can watch it on there now as well. So great. But going back to the quick fire questions, if there's one thing that you could do in your life, and you've already had the things that you've changed around, so you can't use that one again. If there's one thing that you would change in your life as a leader to prioritize your mental health and well-being more, what would that be? And you can't have what you've just told me about taking LinkedIn off your phone and all.
I think the key thing is awareness and talk. I think be aware of the emotions that are going on. Try and get to the bottom of why those emotions are occurring, what's going on to create those emotions, and talk. I think where mental health can really get a grasp on people is where they isolate themselves. They trap themselves away, which is a natural thing that we all do during those periods. But it's amazing what happens when you just open up.
Brilliant. I like that one. My next question for you is that we talk about the stigma of mental health and well-being. Ultimately it is there. It's a challenge that we need to overcome. As a society, as a business community, what do we need to be doing to persuade people to be more open and have these conversations?
I think, once again, like you said, you are right. There is a stigma around mental health, and once again, for many years, I've said openly here now, I've suffered with serious mental health to the point of suicide attempts. I've kept those enclosed in the fear that by admitting that puts people off working with me, wanting to work with me, might make me feel weak. But I think your statistics was 72%.
72% of people experience these challenges.
Which is ridiculously high. I think we can go ahead and say, no matter what, everyone's going to go through something at some stage in their lives. And I think for business owners, they need to realise that being open and vulnerable isn't weak. If anything, it's the strongest damn thing that anyone can do. Once again, it goes back to the more we can talk about it, the more great shows like this can raise awareness, the better, because it's only going to drip feed down, I should say, to those then below us. If us as leaders can be open, honest, talk about things, think of that impact it will have on the people that are a strong, integral part of our teams.
There's a little bit of a follow-up question to that. Obviously, we've had a huge change in government over this year and over the last couple of months. Do you think the government could be doing anything? I just, to full transparency, I've written to my local MP, I've written to some cabinet ministers to say, you need to do something about this. Do you think there's a role that government plays in this?
I think so, if it's done in the right way. So, although I'm a big advocate for talking about mental health, I'm also very wary and scared, to be blunt, that people may utilise the mental health card as an escape, as I think you used the word earlier, an excuse, or they may misdiagnose that I've got depression when they're just sad, or I've got anxiety when they're just anxious or nervous. We've got to be really careful as a society to not label things too quickly. So I agree. Look, I've said, this has got to come from us as leaders to then drip feed down. This has got to come from the top of the top, and drip feed down. But I believe that help, support, and awareness should be led more by training. Let's talk about emotional intelligence in schools. I know how to work out the side of a triangle by knowing the two angles either side. Thanks, Pythagoras. But I don't know how to handle embarrassment. I didn't know how to handle embarrassment, I should say. I was never taught how a relationship breakdown may make me feel scared, vulnerable, embarrassed, pained, or whatever it is. And I think if we can teach those emotions at a younger age, alongside Pythagoras, I'm sure that's a very relevant thing to teach in schools. But let's talk about emotions from a young age, which will then support the mental health further down the line.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. I'm going to leave it there, but there's places that people need to be looking out for you. So Rob Spence, Paragon Sales Solutions on LinkedIn. You've got 2 podcasts.
So we've got 2 podcasts now. So we've got the How I Failed in Business podcast, who I co-host with the wonderful Sophia. So that's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts from. Yeah, anywhere. I've also recently launched the Sales Circle, which is a sales-specific podcast. And eventually there'll be hints, tips, and advice on the best sales practices as well.
And Instagram, we can watch you going to see Taylor Swift.
Absolutely, yeah. So Instagram.
Hoover in the office.
Yeah, all you got to do is search Rob Spence, Rob John Spence, Paragon Sales Solutions. We're just setting up the creative studios, Paragon Creative Studios. So if you do a search, you should be able to find us somewhere.
I'm waiting for this very geeky, nerdy, as you called it, retro games podcast. I feel
well,
like we need to start it somehow.
do you
I'm
know
not
what?
nerdy enough. I don't think.
That's not a bad shout. That isn't. I think there is a space for interviewing business leaders whilst playing Pac-Man. I think there is something there, isn't there?
I expect to see a networking event doing exactly that, and I know just the person that can try and organise
Watch this
it.
space.
So yeah, thank you, Rob. Really do appreciate it, and it's been great. And thank you for being so open and honest.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.